Hi everybody, welcome to week 2 of our English 3010 online course. I'm really excited to be getting into more of the meat of Project 1 and really starting to get into the research processes that are going to feed into your building of your website. So I'm going to take a minute here and talk about what I'm going to say in this video. Then I'm going to switch over to our Canvas view and walk you through some things. So in this video, I'd like to go through the week's activities plans. I want to talk about the purpose of Project 1 and give you some reminders and tips for setting up your interview and doing your secondary research. And then I'd like to end this video by going through a heuristic or a set of questions that I'd like to have us be using in that consistent, continuous way that we'll be using it for Project 1, but I hope that it will be useful and that we'll continue to use it throughout the semester. All right, so it's a lot to cover, so I'm going to take a second now and switch over to our Canvas site. Okay, so here we are in our online classroom. And I'm going to scroll us down here. We've already done all this stuff associated with week 1. And now I'm going to take us into our week 2 activities page. So one of the first things you'll notice when the week 2 activities page comes up is that there is significantly less on your plate directly from me this week. And that's intentional, but we'll get back to that. So this week, we're going to develop an understanding of writing within your discourse community. So last week, we spent the whole week talking about, first of all, what is a discourse community? And if you read Swales and loved him, like I do, although he's not the easiest read, so maybe you didn't love him, but that's okay. If you read Swales, you know that there are 6 characteristics that we're going to use to define a discourse community for ourselves. So you identified that in your project builder number 1, and you worked through those characteristics to help you define your discourse community. Now, this week, we're researching those characteristics, specifically the reading and writing practices or the literacy practices of your discourse community. So that's really what we're focusing on this week. So for your activities, you want to watch the week 2 video, which you're doing right now. High five. And you want to read the following. Really, I just have 2 formal reading assignments for you. One is this brief chapter from Elizabeth Wardle on identity and authority, and how both of those things come into play when you're learning to write in a new context. And then I have the Project 1 student sample website, which is linked down under student samples. And I want to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But we'll come back to those. Number 3 here in your to-do list is just to follow your research plan. Keep researching. Keep finding the journals that are used in your discourse community. Look at a couple sample articles. Look at some of the ways that people communicate on the internet. Look at some of the ways that people communicate in the discourse community based on your interview. Okay, pause for a second. Don't forget your interview. That's right. As part of your assignment for Project 1, I want you guys to be, if you haven't already set it up, set that thing up. Make sure you have targeted and communicated with somebody via email, phone, or if you work or shadow or intern somewhere, talk to somebody in the discourse community. Those interview questions that you generated for Project Builder 2, you can use those for your interview. You could revise those too and use slightly different ones or add to them or take away some. So make sure that you're on that because this project doesn't last forever. We've only got 2 more weeks, so make sure that you have that interview in the works this week. In terms of writing, really just a reading response for Wardle and the sample and thinking about how those two things might feed into each other. Your Project Builder 3 this week is a summary of your research findings. So that includes your interview, which we've already talked about, so no need to harp on that again, and also any secondary research that you've found via the library databases, you're searching online, anything like that. And last but not least, just a quick reflection journal to check in with yourself and your progress that you're making in this whole project. So let's look at how that shakes out for the weekly calendar. This week, try to aim to watch the week 2 video and have your readings and reading response done by midweek maybe, so that you can spend the rest of the week focused on finishing your research, gathering stuff online, make sure you complete that interview so that you can write up your summary and do your reflection journal at the end of the week. By Sunday, you can begin probably building your website. Speaking of, we talked about this student sample. I'm going to show you guys how to get to it because it's a little funny, I think. But it is linked. The link does work. You just kind of have to push on through to get there. All right, so if you head down here, I'm scrolling down on our Canvas page, down to student samples, okay? And you'll see here there is the Project 1 student sample of a digital research guide that's already been created. You'll pull up this page, which at first might seem like, whoa, I can't open it, because it says you're trying to launch insecure content, danger, Will Robinson. But don't fear. You can click here on this link and it will open the page in another tab. So what you'll see when you open this is a student who's done a great job with Wix as her platform. Again, you can choose any. You can choose Weebly, you can use WordPress, you can build your own, you can use Adobe, whatever you want to use. And it's taking forever to pull up here. But while this is pulling up, I will say that with any student samples that I have posted, I just want to clearly say for everyone that I am not posting perfect examples, because I've been teaching for a long time and ain't nobody given me a perfect example yet that I know of. So please take all of the student samples with a grain of salt. Not every single detail of every student example is meant to be copied per se. Some students struggle with that, and then they feel frustrated if they do something exactly like the student sample and it doesn't quite work for them or their discourse community. That's because every discourse community presents a different rhetorical situation, and you might need to respond to it differently. Okay, so this is taking forever to load, so I'm going to bail on that. I'm just going to trust that you guys will be able to open this on your own. I'm going to pull us back into Canvas. Well, maybe. I want to say a couple of things quickly about our Canvas site, and then I'll move on to our writing heuristic. So one of the things I wanted to say is that your peer mentor, Rayanne, is going to be posting an announcement this week to introduce herself and say hi-de-ho. So pay attention to that when it pops up in your feed. And let's take a minute and talk about this writing heuristic. So what is a writing heuristic? Well, first of all, a writing heuristic is meant to be a series of questions that will help you think through a given topic. So, for example, if you say to yourself, what movie do I want to watch? Well, what mood am I in? What movies are even at the theater close to me? Do I want to go to the theater or do I want to stream something? That series of questions could be called your movie deciding heuristic. Does that make sense? All right. So anytime we encounter new kinds of writing, I'm going to provide you guys with a list of questions that you can take yourself through to figure out what's going on with the goals and the purpose for this kind of writing, this new genre that you're looking at. So here's some questions to ask yourself when you are presented with a new discourse community, a new kind of writing within a discourse community, and just a novel writing task, something that you've never done before or is unfamiliar. First, what are the claims? In, say, research writing for composition studies, which just happens to be my field. What are the claims that people make in my field, in the kinds of writing that I do and that I read and that I participate in and that I give peer feedback on? People make a lot of claims about the nature of writing, of what it means and how people learn to write, what makes good writing. People make claims about different rhetorical strategies and different rhetorical patterns. So those are some claims within my discourse community. What counts as evidence in the discourse community for these kinds of writing? So for me, once again, in composition studies, what counts as evidence oftentimes is a mixed methods approach of both qualitative and quantitative data. So interviews, case studies, classroom observations, ethnographic note-taking strategies, combined with often discourse analysis, linguistic analysis, surveys, different ways to quantify data from the classroom counts as evidence, along with other types of analysis, textual analysis, or rhetorical analysis. Now, if you're approaching a new discourse community and you're looking at a piece of writing, you want to look at how are things organized. For me, in my discourse community, things tend to be organized around arguments, claims, and analysis. So that could be analysis of quantitative data or qualitative data. Now, in another discourse community, like say biology, the organization is going to look very different. It's going to look very traditional, what's called the IMRAD structure, which we're going to talk about later this semester. So how are things literally organized in the paper? When you're looking at the communication practices of a new discourse community, what is the format or style? So this could be anything from it is all very formal academic structure and citation, straight up citation style, APA, all the way. Or it could be something like, well, there's a lot of website formatting, people presenting things in kind of a very informal structure. For example, in tech writing, there are not very many journals that do not exist fully online. So format and style can look different. It can be anything from sentence structure to how something is literally formatted on a page to what mode it gets presented in digitally, on paper, through conference presentations, for example. And the last question in the heuristic is, what is the rhetorical situation here? So I mentioned earlier in this video that every discourse community presents a different rhetorical situation. Now, maybe you're like, I totally know about that from English 1020, Nicole, I'm with you. And maybe you're like, I'm sorry, rhetoric what? Just a quick review. The rhetorical situation includes the audience that you're writing for, which in my case would be other composition scholars, mostly teachers and people who are researching writing practices. The ethos and credibility and the way that the rhetor, the writer, the communicator, is presenting himself or herself. So that might be very formally, that might be trying to strike some kind of balance, that might be very informal. There are different ways that we can establish our credibility through experience, through citation practices, through different kinds of sentence structures that we use that signal that we are or are not fluent in the literacy of this discourse community, and the message or the purpose of the piece of writing. Is it largely to persuade? Is it largely to present detached quantitative results? Is it to create some kind of debate? Is it to tell a story? There are a lot of different messages and purposes for a piece of writing. So, just to review really quickly, a writing heuristic to take yourself through anytime you're thinking about the ways that people read and write in a discourse community. What are the claims that are being made? What counts as evidence? How are things organized? What's the format or style? And what's the rhetorical situation, which we often delineate by making a triangle out of that. Okay, so that was pretty hit and run, but I'm going to take us back out and close out this video. Alrighty, so basically the things that you want to keep in mind this week are that your main purpose here is to research and get a feel for the reading and writing practices of your discourse community. Because once you get a feel for that, that's the stuff, that's the information that you're going to present in your website. Your website is supposed to be giving people maybe who don't really have a good understanding of your discourse community a window into how people communicate, what they prioritize, what people read, what people write, how people get their ideas across within your discourse community. So that gives you a sense of the rhetorical situation for Project One. And that's part of why I'm making it a website assignment, because this gives you actually a very real audience that you want to attend to. You're trying to reach out to people who are not very familiar with your discourse community to make your discourse community a little bit organized and make a little bit of sense to them. So, as always, if you have any questions this week, feel free to shoot me an email. You'll be hearing from our peer mentor, Rayanne, very soon, and I will talk to you very soon. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.